Chassis. Chapter 1. The Offering. The first snow of November fell like a whisper against the cabin windows, each flake a small ghost dancing in the darkness beyond the glass. Isla Monroe stood at her kitchen counter, hands trembling as she divided the venison stew into 5 portions instead of 1. It had become a ritual, this strange compulsion she couldn't explain even to herself. 4 bowls went onto the wooden tray, steam rising into the cold air of the cabin. The 5th she left on the stove, though her appetite had vanished weeks ago, around the same time the rejection letter arrived from the Silver Pine Pack Council. Your application for sanctuary has been reviewed and denied. Omega wolves without pack affiliation pose an unnecessary risk to established hierarchies. Furthermore, your bloodline carries markers of instability. We cannot... She'd stopped reading after that. The words had blurred together, each one a small knife finding the spaces between her ribs. Instability, risk, unaffiliated. Words that meant, you are broken, you are unwanted. Isla pulled her father's old coat around her shoulders, too big, smelling faintly of pine and the tobacco he used to smoke, and lifted the tray. The cold bit at her fingers as she opened the door, but she barely noticed. The physical discomfort was easier to bear than the hollow ache that had taken up residence in her chest. The forest beyond her porch stretched into infinite darkness, the trees like sentinels guarding secrets she'd never been allowed to learn. Her cabin sat at the edge of human territory, a mile from the nearest town, 10 miles from the border of packlands she'd never be permitted to cross. This was the space for people like her, the in-between, the forgotten. She set the bowls down in their usual spots, north, south, east, and west, forming a protective circle around her small home. It was superstition, probably, something her grandmother had done, back when Isla was small enough to believe in magic and mercy. "I don't know if you're out there," she whispered into the wind, her breath forming clouds. "I don't know if you're real, or if I've lost my mind. But if you are, if you're hungry..." No response came. It never did. But every morning the bowls were empty, licked clean. Isla returned inside, locking the door and checking it twice. A habit born of 5 years living alone, of being a wolf without a pack, of knowing she was vulnerable in ways that kept her awake at night. She'd been 19 when her parents died in the car accident. 20 when the grief had triggered her first shift. Late, painful, and wrong somehow. Her wolf was small, white as fresh snow, with eyes too human and a howl that sounded like weeping. The local pack had taken one look at her and seen what she was. An Omega. The weakest link. A wolf whose very presence could disrupt their hierarchy, whose submission and fear might spread like a sickness among stronger wolves. They'd offered her a choice, leave or be forcibly removed. She'd left. For 3 years she'd drifted between human towns, working odd jobs, never staying long enough to form connections, never shifting, because shifting alone was dangerous. Without a pack to ground her, the wolf's instincts could overwhelm the human mind. Then 6 months ago, she'd found this cabin, abandoned, half-collapsed, at the edge of nowhere. She'd spent her savings making it habitable, and somehow, in the solitude and silence, she'd found a fragile kind of peace. Until the dreams started. Dreams of wolves with eyes like burning amber. Dreams of running through snow under a full moon, surrounded by shadows that felt more like family than anything she'd known in years. Dreams where she wasn't alone. And then, 3 weeks ago, she'd woken to find massive paw prints in the snow around her cabin. 4 sets of them, circling her home like a dance. That was the night she'd started leaving food. Now, as she curled up on her threadbare couch with a blanket and a book she couldn't focus on, Isla felt the familiar prickle of awareness on the back of her neck. That sense of being watched, of not being alone even though she'd checked every lock, every window. The howl started at midnight. It echoed through the forest, deep and resonant, raising every hair on her arms. Not the sound of a wild animal. This was language, full of longing and command, and something that made her wolf stir for the first time in months. Isla pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heartbeat accelerate. Another howl joined the first, then a third, a fourth, a chorus. They were close. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain with shaking fingers. The moon hung full and heavy above the trees, turning the snow-covered clearing into a silver mirror. And there, at the edge of the forest, 4 massive wolves emerged from the shadows. They were nothing like her, Where she was small and pale, they were enormous, their fur black as midnight except for markings she couldn't quite make out from this distance. They moved with synchronized grace, predators perfectly in tune with one another. A pack. Isla's breath caught as they approached the bowls she'd left, but they didn't eat. Instead, they sat, four pairs of eyes fixing on her window with an intelligence that sent ice down her spine. The largest wolf, nearly the size of a small horse with silver-tipped ears, stepped forward. Even from here, she could see the power in its stance, the way the others deferred to it without question. An alpha. And then it did something that made her knees buckle. It bowed its head, slowly, deliberately. The other three followed suit. Before Isla could process what she was seeing, a sound like breaking branches filled the air, sharp, visceral, painful. She watched in horror and fascination as the alpha's form began to shift, bones realigning, fur receding. Within seconds, a man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with black hair that fell to his jaw and skin that seemed to glow in the moonlight. He wore nothing, shifters rarely did after a change, but he radiated a raw magnetism that made it impossible to look away. His eyes found hers through the window. Amber. Burning amber. From her dreams. When he spoke, his voice carried across the distance with impossible clarity. Isla Monroe. Omega of no pack. Terror and something else. Something dangerous that felt almost like hope flooded through her. We've tasted your offerings, your kindness. He took a step closer, and the other wolves rose to flank him, still in animal form. We are the Blackwood Pack, outcasts, like you. Isla's hand pressed against the cold glass, her wolf surging inside her with sudden, desperate longing. The world held its breath, waiting for her answer. Chapter 2. The Threshold. Isla's rational mind screamed at her to stay inside, to lock the doors and hide until morning. Strange wolves didn't appear at your door with polite requests. They took what they wanted, they dominated, they destroyed. But her wolf, that quiet, wounded part of her that had been sleeping for so long, rose up with a force that stole her breath. Pack, pack, pack. The word echoed through her bones like a prayer. Her hand was on the doorknob before she'd made a conscious decision. The cold hit her first, sharp enough to clear her head for a moment. She stood on the threshold, still protected by the doorframe, by the thin boundary between her sanctuary and the wild unknown. The alpha hadn't moved. He remained at the edge of her porch, snow melting beneath his bare feet, utterly unbothered by the freezing temperature. Up close, he was even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked carved from stone, and those eyes. Gods, those eyes. They held an ancient weight, as if he'd seen centuries pass and carried the memory of every moment. You know my name, Isla said, hating how her voice trembled. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Kael Blackwood. He gestured to the three wolves behind him, who watched her with varying degrees of intensity. My brothers. The question escaped before she could stop it. Why come to me? I'm nobody. I'm not even a real wolf. I can barely shift without losing myself. Kael's expression softened, and somehow that was more dangerous than his earlier command. You don't see it, do you? Isla wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware she was standing in her father's coat and flannel pajamas, barefoot and unprepared for whatever this was. I felt like something was out there. She swallowed hard. Kael took one careful step forward, still maintaining enough distance that she didn't feel threatened. Do you know what most wolves do when they encounter strangers on their territory? They attack. They defend. He tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. But you? You sensed us, and your first instinct was to feed us. To care for us. That's not weakness, Isla Monroe. One of the wolves behind him, slightly smaller than the others, with a distinctive white marking on its chest, whined softly. Kael glanced back and some silent communication passed between them. My brother Finn wants you to know he's particularly fond of your stew. Despite everything, the fear, the confusion, the sheer impossibility of the situation, Isla felt a laugh bubble up. It came out shaky but real. Kael asked, surprising her with the courtesy. It's easier to talk as men, and I promise we have clothing stashed nearby. Isla nodded, not trusting her voice. The transformation was both horrible and beautiful to witness. Bones cracked and reformed, fur receded into skin, limbs elongated and changed. Within moments, 3 naked men stood where the wolves had been, and they immediately moved to a small bag hidden behind a tree, pulling out clothing with practiced efficiency. The one Kael had called Finn was leaner than his alpha, with auburn hair and a face full of freckles that made him look younger than he probably was. He caught her staring and grinned, wide and genuine. "Hi, I'm Finn." The third man, dark-skinned with haunted eyes, didn't smile but inclined his head respectfully. They looked nothing alike except for one thing. They all moved with the same carefully controlled power, and they all deferred to Kael without question. "Blackwood Pack," Isla repeated, testing the name. Garrett's voice was rough, like gravel underfoot. "We were exiled from the Northern Territories 7 years ago, branded as rogues." The word sent a chill through her. Rogues were dangerous, wolves who'd broken pack law, who'd killed or stolen or worse. They were hunted, eliminated without mercy. Kael must have seen the fear flash across her face because he stepped forward again, close enough now that she could smell pine and smoke and something wild clinging to his skin. "We didn't commit the crimes they accused us of," he said quietly, and there was such conviction in his voice that she believed him. "But we couldn't prove our innocence, so we ran." "4 of you?" Pain flickered in Kael's eyes. "We were 12 once, a strong pack." His jaw tightened. "Now we're 4. Isla's throat constricted. She knew that loss, that grief. Different circumstances, but the same hollow ache. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ash spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly soft. "Be smart. We're not asking you to trust us. Not yet. But we need somewhere to rest for the winter. Somewhere safe." He exchanged glances with Kael. "I can't," Isla started, panic rising. "I don't know how to be part of a pack." Kael's hand rose as if to touch her, then stopped, hovering in the air between them. "We're all broken here, Isla. All rejected, all alone." The dream flashed through her mind, running through snow, surrounded by shadows that felt like home. Her voice cracked. "What if my wolf is too weak, too unstable?" Kael's eyes held hers, and she felt something shift in the air, something primal and inevitable. Behind him, Finn nodded encouragingly. Even stoic Garrett looked at her with something like hope. "1 week," Isla heard herself say. "You can stay for 1 week. In the barn behind the cabin. It's rough, but it's shelter. After that, we—" Kael's smile was like sunrise breaking through storm clouds. 1 week. As the 4 of them moved toward the barn, Finn carrying their supplies, Isla stood in her doorway and watched them go. Her wolf was singing inside her, pure and clear for the first time in years. But her human mind whispered warnings she couldn't quite silence. What had she just agreed to? And why did it feel like her life had just irrevocably changed? Chapter 3. The First Morning. Isla didn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of movement from the barn, the creak of old wood settling, low voices murmuring, the occasional laugh that carried across the frozen air. Normal sounds, comforting sounds, dangerous sounds because they made her want things she'd stopped letting herself want. When dawn finally broke, pale and hesitant through her frost-covered windows, she forced herself out of bed and into the kitchen. If they were staying, even temporarily, she should feed them properly. It was the least she could do. And if she was making extra biscuits and double portions of eggs, well, they were large men. They needed the calories. She was pulling the 3rd batch of biscuits from the oven when a knock came at her door. Soft, almost apologetic. Finn stood on her porch, fully dressed now in worn jeans and a thick flannel shirt, his auburn hair sticking up in several directions. He held a bundle of firewood in his arms and wore an expression of such hopeful nervousness that Isla's heart clenched. "Morning," he said, breath puffing white. "Kael said not to bother you, but I noticed your woodpile was getting low, and I thought—" He stopped, suddenly uncertain. "Is this okay? I can leave." Isla found herself smiling despite her exhaustion. It's okay. Actually, I was hoping one of you might come by. I made breakfast. Finn's face lit up. Really? Oh man, I could smell it from the barn, and I was dying. Garrett threatened to sit on me if I came over without permission, but he caught himself, grinning sheepishly. I'm rambling. Isla stepped aside, letting him in. He set the firewood by the hearth with surprising gentleness, then turned to face her. Because you're the first person in 3 years who's looked at us like we're people instead of monsters. The raw honesty in his voice made Isla's throat tighten. She busied herself with setting the table, pulling out mismatched plates and forks. Go get the others. Tell them breakfast is ready. He paused at the door. Thank you. His smile could have powered the sun. They ate like starving men, which Isla supposed they probably were. Garrett put away enough food for 3 people, while Ash ate methodically, savoring each bite with closed eyes. Kael sat at the head of her small table, a position he'd taken unconsciously, naturally, and watched her with those unnerving amber eyes. This is incredible, Finn mumbled around a mouthful of biscuit. Isla, will you marry me? I'm serious. I'll do anything. Kael's voice held mild warning, but there was amusement in his eyes. What? Finn pointed his fork at his alpha, completely unafraid. Watching them, Isla felt something unfurl in her chest. This was pack behavior. The easy teasing, the comfortable silence, the way they moved around each other with unconscious coordination. She'd read about it, dreamed about it, but never experienced it. It hurt. It was beautiful. It terrified her. Tell me about yourselves, she said, pouring more coffee. Garrett spoke first, his gruff voice softening slightly. I was a fighter, before the exile. He flexed his scarred hands. Ash's quiet interjection surprised everyone. Garrett saved our lives more times than we can count. Garrett looked away, uncomfortable with the praise, but Isla saw the ghost of pleasure cross his weathered face. I was a healer, Ash continued, and now his haunted eyes made sense. I couldn't save everyone when the hunters came. I couldn't. His voice broke. Kael reached across the table, gripping Ash's shoulder briefly, a gesture of understanding, of shared grief. You saved who you could, Kael said firmly. Finn cleared his throat, clearly trying to lighten the mood. I was basically useless. Still am. I'm fast, I can track pretty well, and I make excellent company. Oh, and I can do this. He wiggled his ears. Despite everything, Isla laughed. It burst out of her unexpectedly, and for a moment the darkness lifted. She looked at Kael, who'd been quiet. Something shifted in his expression. I was going to be my father's heir, the next Alpha of the Northern Territories. His jaw tightened. The words fell like stones into still water. They wanted the territory, Garrett added, voice hard. The council did. They used Kael's age, he'd just turned 23, to claim he was unstable, hungry for power. We ran with whoever would come, Kael continued, staring at his coffee. 12 wolves who believed in my innocence. He looked up, meeting Isla's eyes. Now we're 4. You didn't fail anyone, Finn said fiercely. We chose this. Isla's heart hammered against her ribs. She understood now, the weight Kael carried, the way the others looked at him with devotion and trust despite everything they'd lost. He was an alpha who'd sacrificed everything, including his own peace, to protect those who remained. She asked softly, Why now? You've survived 7 years. The 4 men exchanged loaded glances. Kael's hand tightened around his mug. We've been having dreams, he said finally. For the past 6 months. Dreams of a white wolf running alone through snow, crying out for pack. His eyes burned into hers. 3 weeks ago, we tracked the source of those dreams. They led us here. The world tilted. That's impossible. I haven't been projecting. I barely shift. I can't. Your wolf has been calling, Ash said gently, whether you knew it or not. And we answered, Kael finished, because we need it too. Isla pushed back from the table, heart racing. I don't understand. Omegas are weak. They're liabilities. Why would you... Omegas are the heart of a pack, Kael interrupted, standing as well. They're the emotional center, the healers of broken bonds. Without one, packs become nothing but violence and hierarchy. He took a careful step toward her. We've been falling apart, Isla, fighting with each other, losing hope, until we felt you, Finn added quietly. Tears burned in Isla's eyes. Kael's smile was sad and knowing. What if we can't be what you need? But maybe... Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and silent. And inside Isla's chest, her wolf whispered one word, home. Chapter 4. Fractures in the Ice. The next 3 days passed in a strange, tentative rhythm that felt like learning to breathe underwater. Difficult, unnatural, but somehow necessary. The Blackwood brothers kept their distance mostly. They worked on the barn, reinforcing walls and fixing the roof that had leaked for 2 winters. Garrett chopped enough firewood to last until spring. Finn hunted, bringing back rabbits and deer that he cleaned with practiced efficiency. Ash organized her chaotic herb garden, identifying plants she'd forgotten the names of. And Kael watched. He was always somewhere in her peripheral vision, fixing a shutter, clearing snow from her path, sitting on the barn roof at sunset like a dark sentinel. Never intrusive, never demanding, but present in a way that made her constantly aware of him. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like safety. But on the 4th night, everything changed. Isla woke to screaming. Not the animal kind, the human kind, raw and agonized and coming from the barn. She was out of bed and running before conscious thought caught up, grabbing her father's old hunting knife from the kitchen drawer. The snow bit at her bare feet as she sprinted across the clearing, heart hammering against her ribs. The barn door hung open. Inside, lit by a single lantern, Garrett held Ash pinned against the wall, one massive hand around the smaller man's throat. Finn stood frozen, hands raised in helpless placation. And Kael was shifting, bones cracking, fur erupting across his skin in patches, his eyes flickering between human amber and wolf gold. Finn's voice cracked. "Get out," Garrett growled at Isla without turning. "This isn't safe. But she was already moving forward, driven by an instinct she didn't understand. Her wolf surged inside her, not with fear, but with desperate certainty. Pack, protect, heal. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. His partially shifted form whirled toward her, and for a moment she saw nothing but predator. Teeth bared, claws extended, muscles coiled to strike. This was the wolf that had survived 7 years as a rogue, the alpha who'd fought and killed to keep his brothers alive. He was terrifying. He was magnificent. He was breaking apart. "You need to leave," he forced out through a jaw that was no longer entirely human. She directed the question at Finn, but kept her eyes locked on Kael. "He had a nightmare about the night we were exiled." Finn's voice dropped to barely a whisper. About watching his father die. When he woke up, he was already shifting, and he went for Ash. Isla understood. She'd had her own nightmares, the kind where past trauma bled into present reality, where the mind couldn't distinguish between then and now. "Garrett, let Ash go," she said quietly. "Like hell." Something in her voice, some note of command she didn't know she possessed, made Garrett hesitate. Then slowly he released Ash, who stumbled back, gasping, hand to his bruised throat. Isla took another step toward Kael. His body trembled with the effort of controlling his shift, caught between 2 forms, trapped in the most painful transition. "Tell me about him," she said softly. "Your father." Kael's eyes flickered, confusion cutting through the rage. "Your father." The word came out mangled, half growl. A shudder ran through Kael's body. "The best. He taught me..." Another crack of bone, and he doubled over in pain. "Taught me that strength means nothing without mercy." Isla was close enough now to touch him, close enough to die if he lost control completely. She reached out slowly and placed her hand against his chest. The effect was immediate and startling. Kael gasped, his body going rigid, and then, like ice melting under spring sun, the shift reversed. Fur receded, bones realigned, claws withdrew. Within moments, he was fully human again, breathing hard, staring at her hand on his chest like it was a miracle. "How did you..." he started. But Isla wasn't done. She could feel something flowing from her into him, something warm and steady, like the tide pulling back from shore. It was her wolf, she realized distantly. Her omega nature, reaching out to soothe the alpha's fractured control. "You miss him," she said, and her own voice sounded strange, distant. You miss him every day. The weight of losing him, of being accused, of failing to save the others, it's crushing you. Tears streaked down Kael's face, and he made no effort to hide them. I can't let it go. We do, Finn said hoarsely, moving to Kael's side. We hold each other together. Garrett and Ash joined them, forming a loose circle around their Alpha and the small Omega who'd somehow pulled him back from the edge. You don't have to be unbreakable, Isla whispered, and her hand moved from Kael's chest to his face, catching a tear with her thumb. Kael's hand came up to cover hers, pressing it against his cheek. His eyes closed, and for a moment he looked unbearably young. Not an exiled Alpha carrying 7 years of grief, but a son who'd lost his father too soon. I'm so tired, he admitted, voice cracking. I'm so tired of running, of being afraid. Then stop running, Isla heard herself say. Stay here, with me, not for a week. The words hung in the cold barn air, impossible and inevitable. Kael opened his eyes, searching her face for something. Doubt, perhaps, or fear. But all she felt was certainty, bone-deep and unshakable. He asked, Why would you bind yourself to us? We're fugitives, rogues. Isla smiled, sad and knowing. Because for 3 years I've been alone, convincing myself I was better off that way. Safer. Her voice strengthened. You need me, but I need you too. Finn made a choked sound. Even Garrett's scarred face softened. Kael pulled her hand from his face, but only to thread his fingers through hers. If you do this, if you truly choose us, there's no going back. The bond between an Omega and her pack, it's permanent. You'll feel our emotions, our pain. His grip tightened. We might not survive what's coming. The people who framed me, they have long memories. Something shifted in the barn, in the air itself. Isla felt it like electricity on her skin, like the moment before lightning strikes. The other 3 wolves tensed, feeling it too. Isla, Kael said, his voice dropping to something primal and ancient. Her wolf sang inside her, wild and joyous and finally free. The word had barely left her lips when the world exploded into sensation. Chapter 5. The Bond. It started as warmth in her chest, then spread like wildfire through her veins. Isla gasped, her knees buckling, and suddenly Kael's arms were around her, holding her upright as the bond snapped into place with almost physical force. She could feel them, not just their presence, but their essence. Garrett's fierce protectiveness, sharp-edged with old guilt. Finn's bright joy tangled with fear of loss. Ash's quiet sorrow, deep as an ocean. And Kael, Kael was an inferno of feeling barely contained, centuries of loneliness and responsibility and desperate hope crashing over her in waves. I've got you, Kael murmured against her hair. Breathe through it. Isla clung to him, drowning in sensation, until gradually she learned to separate herself from them, to feel the bond without being consumed by it. It was like learning to hear individual instruments in an orchestra after only knowing noise. When she finally lifted her head, all 4 men were watching her with expressions of wonder and relief. She managed. Ash stepped closer, his haunted eyes brighter than she'd ever seen them. It's never been like that. Most pack bonds form gradually, over months or years. What we just felt. He shook his head. That was instant recognition. Fated pack, Finn breathed. It's real. Garrett made a rough sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. After everything, after 7 years of hell, we finally... His voice broke. The massive warrior looked away, shoulders shaking. Isla pulled free from Kael and went to him, acting on pure instinct. She placed her hand on Garrett's arm and felt her Omega nature reach out to soothe his overwhelming emotion. It's okay. You're allowed to feel this. Garrett turned to her, and there were tears streaming down his weathered face. I didn't think I'd ever feel pack again. You're not alone anymore, Isla said firmly. The next hours passed in a blur. They moved into the cabin. There was no question of separation now, not with the bond humming between them like a living thing. Isla gave them her parents' old bedroom while she took the couch, though the sleeping arrangements felt temporary, unstable. The bond wanted them closer. As dawn approached, Isla found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. Too much had changed too quickly. She was packed now. She had people who needed her, who she needed in return. The weight of it was enormous. She slipped outside, needing air and space to process. The snow had stopped, and the world lay silent and silver under a fading moon. Isla wrapped her arms around herself, breath misting in the cold, and let the tears finally come. Relief and terror in equal measure. She spun to find Kael standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm light from inside. He'd pulled on jeans but nothing else, seemingly unbothered by the freezing temperature. "No," she said honestly, "just overwhelmed." He moved to stand beside her, careful to leave space between them. "I can feel you, Isla. Your fear, your hope." She laughed wetly. "It goes both ways." His voice softened. "You can feel how terrified I am right now." Isla turned to look at him properly. In the moonlight, with his guard down, he looked different, less like an alpha and more like a man carrying impossible weight. She reached out through the bond, tentative, and touched his emotional signature. The depth of his feelings staggered her, protectiveness so fierce it was almost violent, gratitude sharp enough to cut, and underneath it all, longing, not just for Pack, but for something more, something he didn't let himself hope for. "Kael," she whispered. He met her eyes, and the connection between them intensified. "I need you to understand something. The bond between an alpha and his omega, it's different than with the others, stronger." The words came out careful, measured. "Not always. But when an alpha and omega are compatible, when they fit together the way we seem to," Isla's heart hammered. His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. "I'm saying that when I pulled you close earlier, every instinct I have screamed at me to never let go." The raw honesty of it stole her breath. "I barely know you," she said. But even as the words left her mouth, they felt false. She did know him. She knew his grief and his strength and his desperate need to protect those he loved. The bond had given her all of that in an instant. Kael's smile was sad. "And I'm not asking for anything. I just need you to know what might happen between us." He took a careful step back. "You deserve to make an informed choice about this." Isla could feel his withdrawal, physical and emotional, and her wolf whined in protest. But she also felt his respect for her autonomy, his determination not to pressure her. It made her want him more. She asked quietly. But she felt the lie through the bond, the fear that time was exactly what they didn't have. Before she could question it, a howl split the night air. It came from the east, deep and challenging, not a greeting or a hunt call, a declaration of intent. Kael's entire body went rigid. Inside the cabin, she heard the others scrambling, felt their alarms spike through the bond. "That's Pack territory marking," Kael said, voice hard as stone. Garrett burst through the door, already half-shifted. 3 wolves, maybe 4. Finn was behind him, pulling on boots. Kael's eyes blazed gold, his alpha nature rising to the surface. Not with Isla to protect. Another howl, closer now. And this time, Isla recognized the tone. It wasn't just territorial, it was a hunting call. "They're not here to talk," Ash said grimly. Kael's hand found Isla's, gripping tight. Through the bond, she felt his fear, not for himself, but for her, for what she'd just tied herself to. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have known this would happen." Isla squeezed his hand back, her wolf rising inside her with unexpected fierceness. "We face this together." Kael's voice cracked. "If they find out you've bonded with rogues, they'll kill you too." The howls were getting closer. Minutes now, not hours. Isla looked at the 4 men who'd stumbled into her life and changed everything. Finn's freckled face tight with fear, Garrett's warrior stance ready for death, Ash's gentle hands trembling, and Kael's amber eyes burning with protective fury. Her pack, her family, worth fighting for. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. They came with the dawn. 4 wolves emerged from the tree line, massive and coordinated, their dark fur blending with the shadows. They moved like trained soldiers, fanning out to surround the cabin in a textbook tactical formation. Isla stood on the porch between Kael and Garrett, her heart hammering but her feet planted. Behind her, Finn and Ash waited by the door, ready to fight or flee depending on what happened next. The largest wolf, a brindled gray with scars across his muzzle, shifted first. The transformation was smooth, practiced, and within moments, a middle-aged man stood in the snow, naked and unbothered by it. His eyes were cold calculation as they swept over the cabin, the Blackwood brothers, and finally settled on Isla. "Well," he said, his voice carrying authority that made her wolf want to submit. Kael moved slightly forward, placing himself more firmly between Isla and the stranger. "Marcus." Recognition flickered through the pack bond. This man had been there, the night of the exile. He'd stood by while Kael's world burned. Marcus's lip curled. 7 years running, and you finally made a mistake. His eyes found Isla again, assessing. An Omega civilian. "I've given her what she needed," Kael said evenly. "What we all needed." The other 3 wolves shifted, revealing 2 women and another man, all bearing the same pack markings, 3 silver lines across their left shoulders. Silver Pine territory marks, the pack that had rejected Isla's application for sanctuary. One of the women, dark-skinned with silver-streaked hair, stepped forward, her expression less hostile than Marcus's. "Isla Monroe, we remember you." "You remember wrong," Isla said, finding her voice. "I applied for sanctuary. There's a difference. Refuge is temporary." She lifted her chin. "You chose to reject me because I was broken, unstable." "Pack law," Marcus said flatly. The words came out harder than Isla intended, and she felt her pack's pride through the bond. "I was asking for what every wolf deserves, a home." The silver-haired woman flinched. "The council makes those decisions, not individual members." "But you lost," Isla said. She felt Kael's hand brush against hers, a silent gesture of support. "We're here," Marcus corrected, "because you bonded with known fugitives, wolves accused of murder and treason." "I don't recognize your pack law," Isla shot back. "I'm not part of Silver Pine." "Pack law supersedes territory," the other man said, speaking for the first time. He was younger, with kind eyes that seemed genuinely troubled. Finn made a sound of protest behind her, quickly silenced by Ash's hand on his arm. "Then execute judgment on me," Kael said, voice ringing with alpha command. "But you leave her out of this." "That's not how soul bonds work, and you know it," Marcus said. "The connection can't be severed without killing both parties. She chose you." Isla felt ice slide down her spine, but she refused to back down. "If that's pack law, then your law is broken. These men are innocent. They were framed." "Every rogue claims innocence," Marcus interrupted. Isla stepped forward, moving ahead of Kael despite his protest. She felt her Omega nature rising, and for the first time she didn't fight it. She let it pour out of her, calm, soothing, undeniable. "I'm an Omega. You can feel it, can't you?" The 4 Silver Pine wolves tensed, their instincts responding to what she was broadcasting. Even Marcus looked uncertain. "Omegas can sense truth," Isla continued, her voice steady with conviction she didn't know she possessed. "We can feel the emotional reality beneath words." She gestured to the Blackwood brothers. "I've touched their souls through the bond. I've felt their grief, their trauma, their innocence. Kael Blackwood did not kill his father. He loved him." The silver-haired woman was staring at her with something like awe. "You can sense that?" "You can—" "I can sense everything about them," Isla said. "Every fear, every hope, every truth they carry." "This is irrelevant," Marcus said, though his voice had lost some of its certainty. "The council made their ruling 7 years ago." The words came from an unexpected source, the young male wolf. He looked at Marcus with defiant determination. "If an Omega vouches for them, that's evidence." Thomas moved to stand beside the silver-haired woman, creating a clear division in the Silver Pine group. "I was barely an adult when the Blackwood exile happened. I didn't question it then." He looked at Isla with respect. "An Omega's testimony is sacred." The silver-haired woman nodded slowly. "He's right." Marcus's jaw clenched. "The council won't accept this." Kael's voice was dangerous. The question hung in the frozen air. Marcus exchanged glances with the 4th Silver Pine wolf, the woman who hadn't yet spoken. Something passed between them, some silent communication that made Isla's instincts scream warning. There are things you don't understand, Marcus said finally. Larger politics at play. The territory your father controlled, Kael. It's valuable, strategic. The council. He stopped himself, seeming to realize he'd said too much. The council wanted it, Kael finished, his voice hollow with dawning realization. They orchestrated the murder, the frame-up, all of it. The silence that followed was damning. We should kill them all, the fourth woman said coldly. Right now. She shifted mid-sentence, lunging for Isla with lethal intent. But Garrett was faster. The massive warrior intercepted her mid-leap, his own shift explosive and violent. They collided in a snarl of fur and fangs, rolling across the snow in a deadly embrace. Kael commanded, and suddenly Isla was surrounded by her pack, protected on all sides as the clearing erupted into chaos. But through the violence, through the fear, Isla felt something else rising inside her. Her Omega nature, responding to the threat against her pack with a power she'd never accessed before. She opened her mouth, and what came out wasn't a scream. It was a howl. Pure, commanding, undeniable. Every wolf in the clearing froze. And in that suspended moment, with all eyes on her, Isla understood what she truly was. Not weak, not broken. An Omega with the power to stop wars before they started. Chapter 7. The Royal Secret. The silence that followed Isla's howl was absolute, sacred. Every wolf, Blackwood and Silverpine alike, remained frozen, their bodies locked in place by a compulsion they couldn't fight. Even Garrett and his attacker had separated mid-struggle, trembling with the effort of resisting an instinct older than conscious thought. Isla felt the power coursing through her, wild and ancient and completely overwhelming. This wasn't just Omega influence. This was something more, something that made Marcus's eyes widen with recognition and fear. Impossible, he breathed. You're not just an Omega, you're... Let them go, the silver-haired woman interrupted, her voice sharp with warning. But her eyes were on Isla, full of questions and dawning understanding. Isla didn't know how she'd frozen them, and she had no idea how to release them. Panic began to claw at her chest until she felt Kael's presence through the bond, steady, trusting, grounding. Breathe, his voice whispered in her mind, carried through their connection. Your wolf knows what to do. Trust her. She closed her eyes and reached inward, finding that part of herself she'd suppressed for so long. Her wolf rose to meet her, not small and broken as she'd always believed, but magnificent, ancient, powerful. Who am I? Isla asked her wolf silently. The answer came not in words, but in images. A bloodline stretching back centuries, Omegas who'd served as peacekeepers and advisors to the greatest packs. And before that, something older still. Royal wolves who'd carried the gift of compelling obedience, who'd ruled not through dominance but through an authority that bypassed conscious will. Let them move, Isla commanded gently, and the spell shattered. The wolves gasped, stumbling as control returned to their bodies. Marcus immediately shifted, putting distance between himself and Isla, his fur bristling with alarm. Thomas and the silver-haired woman remained human, staring at her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Marcus demanded from his wolf form, the words emerging as growls and body language that every shifter present understood. I don't know, Isla admitted, her voice shaking. The silver-haired woman spoke the word like a prayer, dropping to one knee. You're a Lunaborn. Thomas followed her example, kneeling in the snow. That's why the council rejected your application. Isla looked to Kael, desperate for something to make sense. Through the bond, she felt his shock mirroring her own, but also fierce, protective pride. The silver-haired woman looked up, her expression grave. Lunaborn are Omegas with royal bloodlines. They appear once in a generation, maybe less. They have the power to compel any wolf, regardless of rank. She gestured to the frozen tableau they'd all been part of moments ago. They're also, Marcus said, having shifted back to human form but maintaining his distance, legally entitled to claim any alpha as their mate, to form their own pack from wolves of their choosing. Now his fear made sense. A Lunaborn could upend the entire power structure the council had built on Kael's exile. You hid this, Marcus continued, accusation sharp in his voice. Isla's voice cracked. I thought I was broken, weak. I've never been able to shift properly, never felt strong enough to, because you were suppressing your nature, the silver-haired woman, whose name Isla still didn't know, said gently. Luna-born wolves often experience difficult first shifts. The power is too much for young bodies and minds to handle. She stood slowly, respectfully. My name is Helena, by the way, and I believe you. The council knew, Kael said, his voice cold with fury. When she applied for sanctuary, they would have tested her bloodline. His hands clenched into fists. The pieces were falling into place, creating a picture far more sinister than Isla had imagined. The rejection letter, and the suggestion that she was too dangerous to be near established packs. They'd been afraid of her. This changes everything, Thomas said, looking between Isla and Marcus. With a Luna-born vouching for the Blackwood Pack, the council has no choice but to reopen the investigation. The council won't see it that way, Marcus said flatly. They'll claim she's been manipulated by the rogues. Isla was surprised by the steel in her own voice. Let them come here and accuse me to my face. She moved to stand beside Kael, their shoulders touching. These men are my pack. I choose them. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing options, calculating outcomes. Finally, he sighed. You have no idea what you're starting. The council has spent 7 years profiting from Blackwood territory. Garrett's voice was a low growl. We're tired of running. Helena held up a hand. Before we talk about war, we need to establish something. A ceremony where Luna-born wolves fully manifest their nature. Until you complete it, your powers will be unstable, unpredictable. Helena's expression was serious. What you did just now, freezing us all, that could have killed you if you'd held it too long. Finn spoke up from behind Isla, his usual humor absent. Helena hesitated. The words hit like a physical blow. Isla felt heat flood her face as every eye turned to her and Kael. We're not, she started. We haven't, Kael said at the same time. The bond between you is already forming, Helena said gently, not unkindly. I can feel it. So can Marcus. So can Thomas. She looked at Kael directly. And you need to understand, Alpha Blackwood, that when a Luna-born chooses a mate, she doesn't just bind herself to him. She elevates him. Kael went absolutely still. Of whatever pack she builds. Marcus's voice held bitter amusement. Congratulations, Blackwood. If she completes the revelation and chooses you, you'll have the legal right to reclaim not just your father's lands, but any territory you can hold. Through the bond, Isla felt Kael's emotions warring, ambition and desire tangled with fear and fierce protectiveness. He didn't want power handed to him through her birthright. He wanted to earn it, to deserve it. I'm not doing this for political advantage, Kael said quietly, his eyes finding Isla's. Isla asked, her heart in her throat. Kael reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hands. The bond between them flared hot and bright. I want you safe. I want you happy. I want... His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I want the right to call you mine, but only if it's what you truly want. Not because of destiny or birthright or political necessity. I already chose you, Isla said, tears stinging her eyes. When I accepted the pack bond. She covered his hands with hers. Then we have a problem, Marcus said, shattering the moment. Because in 3 days the full moon rises. He looked at Isla grimly. They've already heard rumors of a Luna-born in hiding. They're going to demand you present yourself. His jaw tightened. They're going to force the revelation, whether you're ready or not. He glanced at Kael. The weight of it crashed over Isla like a wave. 3 days. She had 3 days to master powers she didn't understand, to complete a ceremony she'd never heard of, to become something she'd spent her whole life not knowing she was, or everyone she loved would die. Then we have work to do, she said, forcing strength into her voice. Helena smiled, fierce and approving. With pleasure, Luna. Isla looked at the older wolf, who still watched her with wary calculation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he shifted fully to human, meeting her eyes directly. I'll report to the council that we found you, that you're bonded to the Blackwood Pack. His expression was unreadable. What I won't report is what you are, not yet. It wasn't trust, but it was a chance. Thank you, Isla said. As the Silverpine wolves prepared to leave, Helena touched Isla's arm gently. 3 days isn't much time. The revelation is intense. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, you'll need your pack's strength. Her gaze shifted meaningfully to Kael, especially his. After they left, Isla stood in the snow with her pack surrounding her, feeling the weight of impossible expectations settling on her shoulders. So, Finn said eventually, trying for lightness, our Omega is secretly wolf royalty, and we're all going to a party where the evil council might try to kill us. Despite everything, Isla laughed. Kael's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. Then we prepare. 3 days until everything changed. 3 days to become what she was always meant to be. Chapter 8. The Preparation. The first attempt nearly killed her. Helena had returned at dusk with ancient texts and ceremonial supplies, transforming Isla's small cabin into a makeshift training ground. Now, as midnight approached, Isla knelt in a circle of salt and herbs, trying to access the power that had come so naturally during the confrontation. Nothing happened. You're fighting it, Helena said from her position outside the circle. I don't know how to stop controlling it, Isla gasped, frustration burning in her throat. Sweat dripped down her spine despite the cold. When it happened before, it was pure reaction. I can't just... Her words cut off as pain lanced through her chest. The bond with her pack was pulling, demanding, and she'd been blocking it for hours trying to focus on the ceremony. Kael was beside her in an instant, breaking through the circle despite Helena's protest. His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. You're shutting us out. I can't concentrate with all of you feeling so much, she managed. Through the bond, she could sense everything. Finn's anxiety, Garrett's barely contained violence, Ash's quiet fear. And God's. Kael was a storm of protectiveness and desire so intense it made her dizzy. That's the problem, Helena said softly. The Luna power doesn't come from isolation, it comes from connection. Isla's voice cracked with exhaustion. Helena looked at Kael meaningfully. The way it's always worked. Kael's hands trembled against Isla's skin. Helena began gathering her supplies. I'm going to give you privacy. She looked at Finn, Garrett, and Ash, who'd been watching from the doorway. Your Luna needs her alpha. But, Finn started. Now, Helena said firmly, and something in her tone brooked no argument. Within minutes, Isla and Kael were alone in the cabin, the silence between them heavy with everything unsaid. You don't have to do this, Isla said quietly. The mate bond, it's permanent. If you claim me now, you're tied to me forever. Kael made a sound that might have been a laugh. Isla, I've been tied to you since the moment you opened your door and offered food to 4 dangerous strangers. He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body. I know you're brave enough to stand against trained warriors to protect those you've claimed. I know you see broken things and your first instinct is to heal them. Tears burned in Isla's eyes. That's the bond talking. You're feeling what I feel and I'm feeling that you want this too, Kael interrupted gently. That you're scared not because you don't want me, but because you do. He wasn't wrong. Isla could feel her own emotions reflected back through their connection. The desperate longing tangled with terror, the way her body responded to his nearness, even as her mind listed all the reasons this was too fast, too dangerous, too much. The fear she'd been suppressing finally burst free. What if I'm not actually Luna-born? Then we die together, Kael said simply. But Isla, I've lived 7 years as a rogue. 7 years watching my pack shrink, watching wolves I loved die because I couldn't protect them. His amber eyes blazed in the lamplight. You make me want to live again, to fight for something beyond mere existence. He cupped her face with such tenderness it made her ache. But I don't think you're going to fail. I think you've been preparing for this your whole life without knowing it. Every moment you've spent alone, every time you chose kindness over bitterness, every instinct that told you to feed four strange wolves, even though logic said to hide. That was your Luna nature. You've always been this. Something inside Isla cracked open, some final wall of resistance she'd been maintaining. She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the full force of what he was offering: safety, belonging, love. I'm going to kiss you now, Kael said softly. Isla's answer was to close the distance between them. The kiss started gentle, a tentative exploration, a question being asked and answered. But then the bond flared between them like lightning, and gentle became desperate. Kael's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and Isla made a sound that was half gasp, half plea. This was different from anything she'd experienced. Every touch resonated through the bond, amplifying sensation until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. She could feel his desire, his reverence, his absolute certainty that she was his to protect and cherish. And underneath it all, something else rising, her Luna power, responding to the mate bond like a key finding its lock. Kael, she breathed against his mouth. His voice was rough, strained. Isla pulled back enough to see her reflection in the window. Her eyes had turned pure silver, luminous in the darkness. And around her body, a faint aura of light was beginning to form. The bond is activating the transformation, Kael said, wonder in his voice. But before they could process what was happening, pain exploded through Isla's body. Not the sharp pain of injury, but something deeper. Her bones trying to reshape, her wolf trying to emerge, all of it happening too fast, too uncontrolled. She screamed. Finn! Garrett! Kael's command echoed through the cabin, through the pack bond. They burst through the door within seconds, and Isla felt their presence like anchors in a storm. The pack bond wrapped around her, supporting, stabilizing, giving her something to hold on to as her body tried to tear itself apart. Finn's voice was tight with panic. Circle around her, Helena called from the doorway. She'd apparently stayed close by. Physical contact, all of you, and Alpha alone isn't enough to ground a Luna transformation. Garrett knelt beside Isla, taking one of her hands. Ash took the other, Finn pressed against her back, his forehead between her shoulder blades. And Kael gathered her into his lap, holding her against his chest, his heartbeat steady against her ear. We've got you, he murmured. You're not alone. We're here, all of us. Let the wolf come. Isla closed her eyes and stopped fighting. The shift, when it finally came, was nothing like her previous attempts. Before, it had been agony and wrongness. Now, supported by her pack, anchored by her mate, it felt like coming home. Her body flowed like water, bones reshaping with liquid grace. Fur emerged pure white, but tipped with silver that caught the light like starshine. When it was done, when she stood on four legs for the first time since her disastrous first shift 3 years ago, she felt powerful. Not small, not broken, magnificent. She tilted her head back and howled, not the desperate cry of loneliness she'd made before, but a song of joy and triumph and belonging. Her pack answered, their voices joining hers in perfect harmony. Outside, in the forest beyond her cabin, other wolves took up the call, not threats or challenges, but recognition, acknowledgement. The Luna had risen. Helena stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her weathered face. Beautiful, she whispered. Absolutely beautiful. You're ready, Isla. Isla shifted back, the transformation smooth and painless now that she understood how to work with her nature instead of against it. She looked around at her pack, at Finn's odd expression, Garrett's fierce pride, Ash's quiet joy, and at Kael, whose eyes held such love, it made her breath catch. She asked softly. Always, he answered, pulling her close. 2 days until the gathering. 2 days to prepare for war. Chapter 9. The Journey. They left at dawn, traveling in wolf form through territory Isla had never dared enter. The Silver Pine Gathering Grounds lay 50 miles northeast, through forests thick with pack scent markers and territorial warnings that would have terrified her weeks ago. Now, running beside Kael with her pack flanking them, she felt invincible. The bond hummed between them like a living thing, sharing not just emotions but sensations. The joy of wind through fur, the rhythm of paws striking frozen ground, the wild freedom of movement without human limitation. Ila's white wolf gleamed like a ghost against the snow, while Kael's massive black form remained protectively close, never letting her stray more than a few feet from his side. "You're fast." His voice touched her mind, wonder coloring the thought. The mate bond had opened channels of communication she hadn't known were possible. Faster than any Omega I've ever seen. Lunaborn aren't typical Omegas, Helena's voice joined them. The silver-haired wolf ran point, guiding them through safe passages. They're built for leading, not following. Speed, strength, endurance. She'll match any beta, might even rival some alphas. Pride surged through the pack bond from all four of her wolves. Isla felt herself responding to it, pushing harder, running faster, reveling in capabilities she'd spent years believing she didn't possess. They stopped at midday near a frozen stream, shifting back to human form to rest and eat. Helena had brought supplies, and they huddled around a small fire, sharing dried meat and discussing strategy. "The council will try to discredit you immediately," Helena said, her expression serious. "Let them try," Garrett growled. "Anyone who meets her can feel she's Lunaborn." "Truth doesn't matter if they control the narrative," Ash said quietly. "We need allies." Helena pulled out a worn map marking several territories. "There are 5 packs attending the gathering who've grown tired of council corruption. They've lost lands, lost resources, watched their people suffer while the council lines their own pockets." "Might," Finn repeated, worry evident. Helena met Isla's eyes. "The moment you shift in front of the gathered packs, everything changes. They'll see what you are, feel your power." "They'll fight," Kael said with certainty. "They've spent 7 years building power on stolen land." Isla felt cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Then wolves will die." Kael moved to kneel beside her, taking her hands. "Because of them. Because of their greed and corruption. You're giving wolves a chance to break free from that. Some will fight to protect what they've stolen, yes, but others will fight beside you for justice." The fear she'd been suppressing finally broke free. The certainty in his voice made her throat tight. "I've seen you, Isla. I've felt your power. You stopped 4 trained warriors mid-attack with a single howl. You shifted for the first time in years and made it look effortless. I had help." Finn leaned forward, his freckled face earnest. "That's what makes you strong. You don't try to do everything alone. You let us support you." Through the bond, Isla felt their absolute faith in her. It was humbling and terrifying in equal measure. "Tell me about them," she said, needing to focus on something concrete. "The council members. Who are they?" Helena's expression darkened. "There are 7 council alphas. The leader is Severin Blackthorn. He's the one who pushed hardest for Kael's exile." Kael's jaw clenched, rage bleeding through the bond before he controlled it. "Severin is smart, ruthless, and politically connected," Helena continued. "He'll be your primary opponent. The others follow his lead mostly. Except for Lyra Stormwind, she's always been more interested in accumulating wealth than power." "Bribery," Isla said flatly. "Pragmatism," Helena corrected. "Every alpha has motivations." And they talked strategy until the sun began its descent, then continued their journey. As darkness fell, they reached the outskirts of Silverpine territory, and Isla could smell the gathering, hundreds of wolves, perhaps thousands, all converging on the sacred grounds. So many, she thought, anxiety spiking. "They're here to see you." Kael's mental voice was steady, grounding. "To witness the Luna. You've got this." But as they crested the final ridge and looked down at the valley below, Isla's breath caught. The Silverpine gathering grounds were massive, a natural amphitheater carved into the mountainside with stone circles marking ceremonial spaces. Fires burned throughout the valley, and wolves of every size and color moved between them. The sight was beautiful and overwhelming. At the valley's center, on a raised stone platform, 7 wolves sat in judgment formation. Even from this distance, Isla could feel the weight of their combined authority. The council. And standing before them, surrounded by guards, was a young woman in chains. "No," Helena breathed. Isla demanded, "Another Omega." Helena's voice shook with fury. "They're making an example of her." Through her enhanced vision, Isla watched as one of the council members, a silver wolf she assumed was Severin, began to circle the chained woman. The Omega was crying, pleading, but no one moved to help her. Isla's hands trembled. "Execute her," Kael said grimly. in front of everyone, to establish dominance before you arrive. Something inside Isla ignited, not fear, but righteous fury. This was what the council did. They terrorized the weak to maintain power. They killed those who couldn't fight back. They ruled through fear instead of justice. No, Isla said, and her voice carried Luna authority that made her entire pack straighten. We stop this. Isla, if we intervene, we lose the element of surprise, Helena started. Isla was already shifting, her wolf emerging smooth and fast. That Omega is pack. All Omegas are my pack, and I will not watch them murder someone under my protection. You heard our Luna, Kael's voice rang through the bond, fierce with pride. We run, we fight, we save her. The 4 Blackwood wolves shifted in perfect synchronization, falling into formation around Isla. Helena hesitated only a moment before joining them, her silver wolf taking up the rear. They're going to know we're here, Garrett warned. Good, Isla shot back. Let them see what happens when they threaten what's mine. And then they were running, 6 wolves charging down the mountainside toward the gathered packs, toward the council, toward the chained Omega, who represented everything wrong with the current power structure, toward war. The Luna had arrived, and she was done hiding. Chapter 10, The Revelation. They hit the valley floor like an avalanche. Isla's white wolf blazed through the gathered packs, wolves scattering in her wake as Luna authority radiated from her in waves. She didn't slow, didn't hesitate, heading straight for the stone platform where the chained Omega cowered. The council wolves reacted instantly. Guards shifted and charged, intercepting Garrett and Finn, who peeled off to engage them. Ash circled wide, creating a defensive perimeter. Helena moved to block reinforcements. But Kael stayed with Isla, matching her stride for stride as they closed the distance to the platform. The massive silver wolf, Severin Blackthorn, shifted to human form, his voice carrying across the amphitheater with Alpha command. Stop them! But Isla was already leaping onto the platform, shifting mid-air in a display of fluid grace that made the gathered packs gasp. She landed in human form, naked and glowing with silver light, and the chains binding the young Omega shattered at her touch. The effect was instantaneous and undeniable. Every wolf in the valley felt it, the surge of Luna power that rolled out from Isla like a physical force. Submission, recognition, ancient authority that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the wolf's soul. The guards attacking her pack froze mid-strike. Wolves throughout the gathering dropped to their bellies, unable to resist the compulsion. Even the council alphas staggered, fighting the instinct to kneel before her, all except Severin, whose face twisted with fury and something else, fear. Impossible, he snarled. Isla helped the trembling Omega to her feet, wrapping the girl in her own discarded cloak. You failed, she said, her voice carrying Luna authority that made every wolf present shiver. I survived. I found my pack. Kael shifted beside her, moving to stand at her right hand. Naked and magnificent, radiating alpha power that complemented rather than competed with her Luna presence. Together, they were a force of nature. This woman is Luna-born, Kael's voice rang out. By ancient law, her authority supersedes council rule. By ancient law, she has the right to challenge any decision made in her absence. Oi, Manitai, Severin laughed, but it sounded hollow. You dare speak of justice, Kinslayer? Kael's voice was ice. But you did. You orchestrated Damian Blackwood's death to steal his territory. Murmurs rippled through the gathered packs. This was the first time anyone had publicly accused the council of such crimes. Lies, one of the other council members, a scarred female alpha, spat. Isla stepped forward, and the silver glow around her intensified. I'm Luna-born. I can sense truth and lies like poison in water. Let me touch each council member. Let everyone here feel what I feel. If Kael lies, I'll know. The gathered wolves erupted in noise, some shouting support, others protest. But Isla felt something shifting in the crowd. Curiosity, hope, the desire for truth after years of manipulation. This is preposterous, Severin said, but his voice had lost its certainty. The council's authority is derived from pack consent, a new voice interrupted. An elderly alpha pushed through the crowd, his silver muzzle and scarred body speaking to decades of leadership. Ancient law is clear. Luna-born testimony cannot be refused. Elder Marcus stands with the Luna, another voice called. Thomas, in human form now, stood at the edge of the platform with a group of younger wolves. As does Stormcrest, a female alpha declared, moving to join Thomas. One by one, other alphas began declaring support. Not all, some remained loyal to the council, or too afraid to risk change. But enough. Enough to matter. Severin's face purpled with rage. You're all fools. This woman is no Luna. She's a broken Omega who bonded with rogues. She's been manipulated, corrupted. Then prove it, Isla challenged. Let me touch you. Let me feel your truth. The crowd pressed closer, hungry for resolution. Isla could feel the gathered pack's emotions through her Luna senses, confusion, hope, anger, and underneath it all, exhaustion with the council's rule. Severin's eyes darted between Isla, the supporting alphas, and his fellow council members. She watched him calculate, measure, and finally make a decision. Very well, he said, spreading his arms. Touch me, little Luna. Isla approached slowly, every instinct screaming warning. Through the mate bond, she felt Kael's alarm, his urge to stop her, but she pressed forward, reaching out to place her palm against Severin's chest. The contact hit her like lightning. Images flooded her mind. Severin meeting with hired rogues planning Damian Blackwood's murder, the assassination itself brutal and efficient, the council meeting where they voted to frame young Kael, to exile him and his loyalists, years of corruption, of stolen lands and silenced wolves, the order to reject Isla's sanctuary application when her bloodline test revealed Luna markers, the command to have her killed quietly if she didn't disappear on her own, and underneath it all, a deeper conspiracy. Other Luna-born, systematically hunted and eliminated. A centuries-old campaign to ensure no royal Omega could challenge council power. Murderer, Isla breathed, pulling back as if burned. Not just of Damian Blackwood, but of dozens of Luna-born wolves. The silver light around her exploded outward, and suddenly everyone, every wolf in the valley, could see what she'd seen. The images projected through her Luna power, undeniable and crystal clear. The gathered packs erupted in chaos. Severin moved with desperate speed, shifting mid-lunge, going for Isla's throat with lethal intent. But Kael was faster, intercepting him in a collision of fur and fury. They rolled across the platform in a snarling mass of violence. Around them, the valley descended into battle. Council loyalists fighting those who supported the Luna. Old grievances and new alliances clashing in tooth and claw. Isla stood at the center of it all, the young Omega clutched against her side, and felt the weight of what she'd unleashed. This was what Helena had warned about. This was the bloodshed that came with truth. But as she watched her pack fight, Garrett tearing through council guards, Finn and Ash moving in perfect coordination, Helena defending fallen wolves from both sides, she knew there was no other way. Sometimes justice required a reckoning. Kael, she called through their bond, watching him battle Severin with savage grace. End this. I'm here. We're all here. You're not alone anymore. She felt his response, fierce love and gratitude, before he surged forward with renewed strength. The fight was brutal, quick, decisive. Within moments, Severin lay defeated, his throat beneath Kael's jaws. Yield, Kael commanded, the word a growl. Severin shifted back to human, blood streaming from multiple wounds. Kill me, he spat. Then you die a traitor, Kael said coldly, but not by my hand. He looked to Isla, and every eye in the valley followed. Isla looked at Severin, this wolf who'd killed her kind, who'd murdered Kael's father, who'd built an empire on lies and fear. Part of her wanted vengeance, wanted to watch him pay for every life he'd destroyed, but that wasn't who she was. Strip him of rank, she said, her voice carrying Luna authority across the valley. Exile him and his loyalists, let them know what it means to be rogue, to have no home, no pack. She met Severin's hate-filled eyes. The gathered wolves howled approval, justice without needless cruelty. As guards moved to restrain Severin and the other council members who'd supported him, Isla felt her legs begin to shake. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Kael was beside her immediately, pulling her against his chest. You did it, he murmured. But she could still feel tension in the crowd, uncertainty about what came next. It's not over, she said quietly.